Lucas was looking forward to spending the weekend alone at home while his wife was away on a business trip. It had been a long time since he had the house to himself, and at first, the idea excited him. He planned a quiet evening, picked out his favorite movies, and opened a bottle of wine. But as the night went on, an unexplainable unease settled in. Even though he was alone, he occasionally heard faint noises, tiny rustling sounds, or the subtle shift of shadows. "It's just my imagination," he reassured himself. The next morning, he noticed something strange in the kitchen. A pan on the stove had been cleaned and put away, but he hadn't cooked anything the night before. "Maybe I absent-mindedly cleaned it," he thought, trying to dismiss his growing anxiety. But later that afternoon, as he entered the bathroom, his stomach dropped. There was a small, wet handprint on the shower curtain. He hadn't taken a shower the previous night. The idea that someone else might be in the house sent shivers down his spine, but he kept trying to find logical explanations. He checked the doors and windows. They were all locked. Yet the unease lingered. Later that evening, while sitting on the couch, he noticed something else. The closet door behind him was slightly ajar. He was certain he had closed it before. His heart pounded. Summoning his courage, he approached the closet. Taking a deep breath, he yanked the door open. It was empty. He let out a shaky laugh, scolding himself for being paranoid. That night, as he lay in bed, he heard his bedroom door creak open. His eyes shot open, but when he looked around, the room was empty. His pulse raced. Telling himself it was just a dream, he forced his eyes shut again. At dawn, a noise startled him awake. It was coming from the basement. Swallowing his fear, he slowly made his way downstairs. The basement door creaked as he pushed it open. He sensed movement in the shadows. His breath hitched as his eyes adjusted to the dim light. Among the old storage boxes, a frail, pale-faced man was crouched, staring at him. His clothes were torn, his hair disheveled, and his eyes filled with fear. Lucas stumbled backward. Who are you?" he whispered. The man's voice trembled. "Please, don't call the police. I just needed a place to stay." Lucas's mind spun. He felt a mix of horror and pity. The man looked helpless, but the realization that he had unknowingly shared his home with a stranger for days made his skin crawl. Lucas reached for his phone to call the police, but the man took a step forward, making Lucas instinctively back away. 1,000 thoughts raced through his mind. What if the man was telling the truth? What if he wasn't dangerous? But then, how long had he been watching him? How many nights had he stood in the dark, unseen? The thought made Lucas's stomach churn. He quickly backed out of the basement and slammed the door shut, locking it with trembling hands. He called the police, who arrived soon after. When they pulled the man from the basement, Lucas learned that he had been living in the house for nearly 3 weeks, slipping through cracks and hiding in the shadows. A homeless drifter who had found shelter, but to Lucas, the thought of being unknowingly watched was more terrifying than any ghost story. For weeks after, Lucas couldn't sleep in his own home. Every tiny noise, every flicker of movement in the corner of his eye made his heart race. How could anyone ever be sure they were truly alone? Locking the doors wasn't enough. How could he ever lock away the fear inside him? The incident was over, but for Lucas, nothing would ever feel safe again. Jake was a software developer who frequently traveled for work. This weekend, however, he finally had the chance to stay home alone. He lived in a small apartment and was meticulous about security. The doors and windows were locked, and motion sensor cameras monitored every entry point. Lying in bed, scrolling through his phone, he heard a notification sound. It was from his security app. Motion detected at the front door. A chill ran down his spine. It was past midnight, and when he checked outside, he saw nothing. Opening the recorded footage, he noticed a faint shadow appearing and then vanishing near the apartment entrance. The image was blurry, but something, or someone, had been there. Leaning closer to the screen, he felt his pulse quicken. Could it be a false alarm? A system glitch? Jake tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was just a stray cat or a trick of the light. But then, another notification popped up. Motion detected near the living room window. His breath caught in his throat. He turned his head toward the window, but the darkness outside revealed nothing. He wasn't imagining this. Someone was lurking outside his home. He turned off all the lights and kept his eyes fixed on his phone. Rewinding the footage, he saw a figure move swiftly past his window. In the dim glow of a nearby street lamp, the silhouette became clear, tall, thin, unnervingly still, as if staring directly into the camera. His hands were trembling now. He wanted to call the police, but what would he even say? Someone just walked past my window? Maybe it was a lost passerby. But deep inside, he felt an overwhelming sense of dread. Taking a deep breath, he tiptoed toward the kitchen. Just then, a third notification came through. Motion detected inside the house. His legs nearly gave out beneath him. He was alone, wasn't he? His throat went dry. His breathing became shallow. He tapped on the live feed and froze. There, in the living room, stood a figure. Its back was turned to the camera, head tilted slightly, as if observing its own shadow. Jake's mind went blank. How was this possible? The doors were locked. Cold sweat trickled down his temple as he grabbed his phone and quickly dialed 911. Every ring felt like an eternity. Then, the figure slowly turned its head toward the camera. Jake knew he would never forget that moment. The man's face was distorted. It wasn't quite human. His eyes were hollow, his skin pale and lifeless. Suddenly, the camera feed glitched and cut out. The connection was lost. At that exact moment, Jake's bedroom door creaked open. A scream caught in his throat. He cursed himself for never installing a lock on his bedroom door. Clamping his hand over his mouth, he listened. There were footsteps, slow, deliberate, approaching. His heartbeat pounded in his ears. Clutching his phone tightly, he slid under the bed. As he waited for the police to respond, fear turned into pure helplessness. The footsteps stopped, right next to the bed. Jake felt his body go numb. Then, out of nowhere, police sirens blared outside the apartment complex. A few seconds later, the footsteps retreated. The door slammed shut. Silence. Jake didn't move until the police entered. Strangely, all the doors were still locked, and there was no sign of forced entry. Whoever had been inside had simply vanished. But as he reviewed the camera footage again, his blood ran cold. The figure standing in his living room had been wearing clothes he didn't own, and worse, the face on the screen looked exactly like his own. David had rented an old Airbnb in a quiet town, hoping to escape the stress of city life for a few days. His mind was exhausted from work, and he desperately needed a break. The house was a Victorian-style mansion, elegant yet unsettling. The owner had mentioned in a message that they had bought the place a few years ago but no longer lived there. "Enjoy your stay," they had written. But the moment David stepped inside, he felt an odd unease. The first night passed without incident. He read a book and went to bed early, enjoying the silence. But the next morning, while making coffee, he found an old key on the kitchen counter. It had faded letters etched onto it. Basement. The Airbnb listing hadn't mentioned a basement. His curiosity stirred, but along with it came an uneasy feeling, like someone was watching him. As the day went on, strange details began to surface. In the bathroom mirror's corner, faintly scratched into the glass, was the word, "Don't go." Maybe it was an old prank or an accident, he reasoned. But what truly unsettled him was a bundle of old newspaper clippings he found inside the bedroom closet. The dates were from 15 years ago, and every headline read the same. Missing homeowner, still not found. David scanned the articles, feeling his stomach tighten. The previous owner's name was Richard Holmes, a man who had lived here alone. One night, he had mysteriously vanished, leaving no clues behind. The police had searched but eventually closed the case when no evidence was found. As David paced nervously around the room, he noticed something odd. The back wall of the closet was a slightly different color. When he ran his hand over it, he felt a loose wooden panel. Curiosity overpowered his fear, and he carefully pulled the panel away. Behind it was a narrow passageway. A damp, musty smell filled his nose as he stepped inside. In the dim light, he saw words scratched into the walls. "Has anyone found me?" Below the writing were deep claw marks. His chest tightened. Was this the last place Richard had been? Then, a faint creak echoed from inside the passage. David's pulse skyrocketed. He turned to leave, but he heard something else. Footsteps, slow and deliberate, descending from upstairs. His throat tightened. Someone was in the house. He bolted from the passageway and rushed up the stairs. Slamming the door shut behind him, he locked it, pressing his ear against the wood. A deep breath. A presence just on the other side. Frantically, he typed a message to the Airbnb owner. "Something is wrong with this house. Do you know what happened to the last tenant?" Within moments, a reply came. "Lock the door and get out." Now. Without hesitation, David grabbed his keys and ran to his car. As he sped away, his hands trembling on the wheel, he dared one last glance at the house. The tattered curtains in the upstairs window shifted slightly. Someone, or something, was watching him leave. Richard Holmes had never been found, but perhaps the real question was, had he ever really left?